Hello, this is Fred Lindsley with ImagineTime, and I'm going to spend a few minutes with you today going over the SuperBill. The SuperBill is our most flexible bill. It can be used for recurring invoices. You can create templates and reuse those templates down the road, eliminating the need to recreate the invoice each time a new service is generated. You can combine formats. You can present a detailed format along with a condensed format. So our first example is going to be all rise, robes, and tassels. And I'm going to print a WIP report so you can see the time inventory. That's the button at the bottom left of the dashboard. So here is all our time right here. And I'm going to focus on this year-end review. Year-end review and corporate returns. Let me move this over a bit. Go to our next page and one more slip over there for a total of $4,072.50. Okay. Now I'm going to use our auto create function. So in order to do this, I'm going to double click on the bill type column. That's the fourth column from the right. And I'm going to erase what we already have in there in just a moment, but let me show you what the finished product looks like. Okay, this is what we're going to create. A header and 4 paragraphs for each encapsulating the primary service that we did. Now, not everybody's going to like that presentation, but we're going to show you a few. First, I'm going to wipe this out, okay, and I'm going to select the standard template here. This usually is something you use for an ad hoc service. I'm going to go over to Auto Create, and I'm going to pick this particular engagement. And the format I want is a memo at the top with the work code elements summarized beneath. So I'm going to release the slips for that and then fill the invoice. All right, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. Our first row is a memo row. I'm going to enhance that a little bit by clicking the toolbar, bold and underline. Now, a memo row does nothing more than format and present. You select under detail row subtotal options, the memo row, and then nothing else can be done for that particular row except to fill in the explanation, which also is something I should point out at the very start here. The way that the SuperBill is created is that here are your element rows. These are similar to the paragraphs on an invoice. Okay, down beneath this section is the explanation area and any time slips that would apply to that particular row. So the bottom 2/3 of the screen is driven by the element rows. And as I move from one row to the other, you can see that this bottom section displays different information. On the left side of the bottom section are some options as to how you might want to present expenses and then some other printing features. Also at the very top, you can choose different templates for a client or globally. So if I switch from this to the monthly template, it's going to load a different type of bill for this client. Let's flip back to the standard. Okay, and well, our second row shows you $1,800 at standard. Now that consists of these two slips down here on the bottom of the screen. These are the 2 time entries for RACC, which is the work codes that were associated with this engagement. And we've elected to subtotal this engagement by work code on the invoice presentation. You have more choices than that, but in this case, I'm going to write up these services from the 14.5 hours, totaling $1,812.50, and write it up to $1,900. ImagineTime does a weighted average allocation of that write-up, and it shows you that allocation over here on the bottom right. Now, if you wanted to individually allocate a time slip, you could overtype it and go like that. So if you had one particular case where one staff did a very good job and the other staff was possibly brand new, you could make those changes. Also notice in my clear options, which are now accessible, I've chosen released slips this code. Now, a slip is in a released state when this hold box down below here is unchecked. And the release feature is not very complicated. It's just the way of looking at your entire work in progress inventory and saying, this part of it is what I want to bill, this part I don't want to bill. Now, if you had closure and you knew you were done with your services, you don't care about releasing the time because it's all ready to be cleared. So the other option that you would use might be clear all slips, all codes, or clear slips this code. Those options are more appropriate when you do have closure. The services aren't going to be continued on. You don't need to pick and choose which slips are being billed and which aren't. And because they're based on closure, you don't need to release slips. They automatically will clear the slips for the code that's on the associated element row. Okay? Now, let's go back to release slips this code and look at any of the other options that might be significant here. We have up to 9 subtotaling levels. In this case, we're only using one level. And we have a detail row here as opposed to a memo row or a subtotal row. I'm going to demonstrate that subtotal in just a moment. Now, let's assume that on the other 3 rows, we're not going to change the amounts at standard. At this point, I can click Preview. And there's my invoice. Now, what if you don't want to show all these rows? Maybe you just like to show a paragraph instead. What you can do then is you can move down here and do a subtotal row, okay? And enter a description, and I'll just say year-end accounting and tax services. The other thing you can do is save frequently used explanations. If you press the F4 key, you can insert those explanations, and I just did that there. Now, if that's all I want to say, what's going to happen now is even though these individual components are still in there, so I've released time for this code and for this code, and I've written up this code and I haven't written up this one, even though those specific instructions are still in there, from a display point of view, the client is seeing something very different. They're just seeing this simple invoice. And you may want to show some previous balance information. You can auto set previous balance information, by the way, but in this case we're showing the balance forward, a credit memo, new charges, and the grand total. All right? So that's an example of using the auto create function to jumpstart an invoice. While we're on this presentation, let me show you how you might show a discount. I'm going to remove that subtotal row, clicking on the record selector here and pressing the delete key. Then I'm going to make a different level, and I've created a work code called discount, okay? And I'm going to put minus $200 here. And down here in my explanation, courtesy discount. And this gives us a different presentation. Let's take a look. So now we have the same format as before, but we're also showing a discount. So you have a lot of flexibility there. Also note on the bottom, you can put some comments, and you can also show a payment stub. Those features are optional. Okay. I think that's all we need to go through on this particular client. So let's close out of this one and go to a different SuperBill. This one is called Castle Realty, and I'm going to show you invoice in advance. Okay, Castle Realty has 2 year-end services. We provide some compilation work and a tax return preparation. And then anything outside that scope, we have an agreement with the client that if we do some extra work, as long as we go into some detail on the invoice about it, they'll pay for the extra services. So that's what we've done here. We've shown the extra services with the actual hours and the rate involved. This is a very powerful bill because it makes it possible for you to get paid for the additional time that you put in a job when you've got a client that is very conscientious about wanting you to maintain a budget with them. Let's see how this one's set up. I'm going to double click again into the SuperBill for Castle, and here are our rows. First row is again a memo row. Second row is clear slips this code. Well, we've got closure on this client. There is nothing to pick and choose, and it doesn't matter that the slips on the bottom in the table area are on hold. Notice also down here as I move from one slip to the other, you can actually see and edit the explanation. Okay, so that's $29.50. The standard is $2,800. We have a little write-up there. Our third row is for tax services, and we're using our replacement parameters in here that put the period and the year in instead. And then we have another memo row as a gateway for the additional services. And then finally on our additional services, This one we've changed. We're using bill excluded codes, which means bill anything that's not included in the previously stated work codes. So in this invoice, we have used CYRE and T1120S. So things that are outside those services would be other codes, and those are the slips down here. And we're using just one of those slips, just this $360 slips for evaluation of the pension plan. Now we could present this in detail. That was our first example. Let's show you that again. Right there. The other option is you could change this slip detail column to no, and you could say additional pension plan consulting (H) hours. So that's a presentation that's not attached to the time slip that still gives you the ability to pop in the actual hours. That (H) is actually replaced with the hours that are associated with that element row, which in this case is just the one time slip. If I put another time slip in here, pumping that up to 540, no reason I can't write that up. Let's write it up. Now I'm going to get a different total on the hours there. Now it's 6 hours. Okay, so you can get the hang of this. Now SuperBills are very flexible and they can be reused. So when I come in to do the service for this client next year, I can choose the 1120S template and it's going to remember everything I did on the previous year's bill. Let's say that this client happens to have another service, a monthly service. Well, they've already got a monthly template. I looked it up and it's $200 for accounting services and $150 for payroll. Let's see what that looks like. Now, if I didn't want to break out those individual components on this invoice, I would use a total row. And that would roll up those detail rows, and the total row would say monthly accounting and payroll services. Some of our clients have a situation where basically pretty much all services are included in the engagement. Let me start from scratch and use the standard template. And let's say we have year-end services here. Now, you do need to pick a primary work code when you're setting up the first row, and I'm going to change this to clear all slips, all codes. What this means is that every slip that's in inventory is going to be cleared on this invoice. So this entire inventory of 44 hours for $5,400 shown at the bottom here, that's going to be cleared. Now, if I didn't want to clear them all and I wanted to clear just some of them, I would do released slips all codes. What's the difference between this and released slips this code? Let's stick with all slips so I don't have to bother releasing right now. The difference is that the clearing mechanism doesn't really pay attention to the associated work code. It clears whatever is released, or in this case, whatever is in inventory, because I'm disregarding releases, and it does a weighted average allocation. So I'm going to come down here and do $500, and then I'm going to pick another row here and do $2,500, and then I'm going to pick another row here and do $3,000. Okay, and the first row I'm going to say accounting services, and on the second row I'm going to say tax services, and I'm going to say in the third row consulting services. Now, what is the connection between the description and the time slip? None. The only connection that you need to be aware of right here is that on this bill, which is not a budget line bill, is that I'm billing $6,000 against $5,400 in time, and the system is taking a weighted average allocation of those slips. So based upon whatever slips are in inventory that I'm clearing, there's going to be a weighted average allocation of that $6,000. In this particular invoice, the element rows are nothing more than cosmetic presentations. And I could have as many element rows as I wanted here. It's a little different from the released slips this code or the clear slips this code. In that case, I'm clearing specific slips against a work code. So if you're budgeting for particular work codes was important, that would be the more appropriate approach for you. Now, what else can I do here? If I wish, I could show a discount. Okay. You have to stay with the same primary work code, and I'm going to explain that right now. The reason for this is, what if I didn't have any slips? If I didn't have any time slips, I can create a $5,800 invoice, and ImagineTime is going to say, where's the time? Okay, there is no time. Well, where do you want me to associate the income? That's why you need a primary service code for this. In the event that there are no time slips, ImagineTime will code all of this income against CYRE. And what it's doing here is it's automatically subtracting the $200 before it does the weighted average allocation on the bottom of the screen. So let's take another look. And I forgot. Oh, well, this is a good example. I'm going to go back and fix that and subtotal it. So over here I'm going to say courtesy discount. And if I put it in a separate row, then I'm going to see, and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's how you would subtotal. And again, you can have up to 9 subtotaling rows. Many of our customers will pre-fill a template with 20 element rows, and one of the options in the SuperBill is to only use the ones that have information, so you could suppress 0 rows, and that allows them to start out with a detailed budget for each particular month. All right, so that's an example of how to create something on the fly, how to load bills that have already been created, showing you how to do that right here. What about monthly service bills? Well, let's go over to monthly. Let's say that this customer has never had a monthly bill before. I've got a master monthly template. It's going to load it automatically. It brings in 2 elements and a bill excluded, which gives you the option of billing those extra services. I'm going to delete the bill excluded row. We're going to bill them $250 for monthly accounting and $150 for payroll and preview, and bam, I've quickly set up a monthly service bill. Now, how did I do that? Well, let's jump out back to our dashboard and go to billing options, super bills. Here are the names of my master templates. So if I wanted to add another one, I would simply, let's go MAS, something like that. So I just added another template. Now, let's say that I have 10 clients that I do monthly MAS services for a range of fees. Now, what I could do is I could set up one master template like this and put in a dollar placeholder. I'm not going to clear all slips. I'm just going to choose one work code, management advisory consulting, and monthly accounting and on consultation. And let's say I do that for quite a few people. By the way, this note is important. It's used in your ledgers. In ImagineTime, we have an accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, which shows a brief synopsis of what was on the invoice. It avoids having to reprint it to see the essential services. This note is important in the creation of that amount. So I'm just going to say MAS there. Okay. Now, on the clear options, the master clear options are the same as for the actual client level. 2 clear options that I didn't cover are don't clear slips, okay, and well, I think and apply progress bill. These 2 are used for progress billing. So if I had one of those invoices where I cleared some time and I also wanted to bill $1,000 against audit work that we hadn't started, I would use don't clear slips. That's going to create a work in progress WIP allowance, sort of a contra account against future services, and then when that progress bill or progress bills culminate in the completion of the project, you're going to apply the progress bills and finalize those bills. It'll all wrap itself up in a nice little project, and you'll see an overall realization result. But for now, back to this monthly invoice, $1 placeholder, basic services here. How many clients have this? Click the choose, and I'm going to pick this one. Holding down the shift key, I can pick non-contiguous rows. So there's 6 clients I've picked. Now I'm going to choose quick edit. Oops, missed a step. I have to click clone bill type. And now I choose Quick Edit, and here are my 6 rows. Now if I have a list in front of me, I know what I'm supposed to bill them, I can just quickly go in here like this and set the bills up. So this is so easy when you're doing like a monthly invoice format. And this doesn't have to have one row. You can set this up with multiple rows for each client. So it's a very flexible format. Okay. Now, that's a nice way to get started quickly. Let's clear the dashboard. Choose the auto biller. Pick SuperBill, MAS, load auto bills. And you can see 6 clients are loaded here. I'm going to turn off the current row feature. That prints only the row that you're currently on. That row would often be marked by this little black arrow here in the record selector area. So I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm going to click Print Bills. Now you can see that I'm quickly doing 6 bills for monthly services. Now, some of the clients may have balance forwards, some may not. If you want that to auto set in your billing options, okay, check this auto set balance forward information. You'll also want to pay attention to your invoice format. Some folks like to have mini statements, which shows the balance forward with some activity. Others just want the balance forward. So you have some flexibility as to how to present the balance that's due the client before the current service is added. So this invoice presentation that you're seeing in that when you have a balance forward, and let's just do this one row here, is a combination of both the invoice and some balance information. We call that a mini statement. So for many of those clients, if you use that presentation, you won't need to send them statements. You can just send statements to clients that haven't been invoiced in the current month. Okay, and also we've selected to show the remittance advice on the bottom of this. So that's an example of how you could create a group of similar invoices to go out each month for a recurring service. What if I pick up a new client, let's say all you can eat, and they're also going to have this monthly service. Instead of going back through that cloning procedure, I can just pick MAS. It'll ask me, do I want to load the default elements? It brings it in. They're $600 a month. And so now I've added one new client to my list of MAS monthly service clients. So I hope what you're getting here is the SuperBill is an extremely flexible instrument. Templates, there can be an unlimited number of them. They're instantiated and saved at the client level, but they're created initially at the global level. A global template can be imported to a client as a starting point. Nothing more than that. It's just a convenience. Once you've used invoices, they're basically there for next year as a starting point. So you always have a good idea of what you built in the previous year for the same service. As a matter of fact, I've cleared this dashboard. Let's go back to Castle. Drill down. Choose Comp 1120S. And let's say a year's gone by. And here we are. $29.50 against $2,800 in slips. I'm going to bill them $3,100 this year. $750 for the tax return stays good against $690. I'm going to hold off billing any extra services this year because I've got a lot of them. I'll bill them separately. Let me preview the invoice with balance forward information. Here it is. Satisfied with that? Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and post it. Okay, posting the invoice clears the time, it doesn't delete it, and creates realization history. The write-ups or write-downs between our standard rates and what we're actually able to achieve when we invoice the client. On the dashboard, the third column from the left says double-click on the name to view the invoice history. So if I double-click on Castle, and I select this invoice row and choose Billing History, you can quickly see that I cleared 28 hours at $34.90. I had $360 of write-ups, and the bill went out for $38.50. So I have all the information I need to discuss the details of this engagement with a client. I can also reprint the invoice. And if I want to reprint it with the balance forward information, I can also do that. Last, if there is an error on the invoice and you've posted the time, it's very easy to undo it. You choose Delete Unpaid Invoice, process the adjustment, all the time is brought back in inventory. Here it is. I'm ready to start over. Okay. Now, in this case, the actual net slips are something less than the actual slips that were closed out. The reason for that is if I drill down to view this client, you can see that for Castle Realty, under my account balances, I actually have some progress billing going on. And there were 3 invoices, maybe progress bills on the audit or something else. So when you see the net slips on the dashboard, be aware that that's after subtraction of the progress bills. Show you what I mean. If I double click on net slips to release them all, okay, actually the slips released are $5,400. Now, there are 3 ways to release slips. I showed you a quick way on the auto create screen. Over here, back on all rise robes, you can quick hold and quick release just by double clicking these 2 boxes here. Same thing for expenses, okay? But if you're a person that likes to pick and choose, you can release from within the SuperBill screen. So if I'm in here, I pick, let's see, standard. I think we still have something in there. And I go to this row and click release. I've just released all the slips for RACC. If I go to this row and I just release this one, then I've just released 1 slip. Okay, now I've released all the slips. I'm going to do a weighted average here, and that accomplishes that. So you can release from within the SuperBill screen by, unchecking individual boxes. You can also hold them all or release them all for that work code, just like that. This will show you the released slips. So there's a second way to release. Actually, that's the third. The first was in the auto create, there's a release for the engagement. You can release quickly right on the dashboard. You can release from within the SuperBill. Other folks like to hit this release edit button right here. And what I like about this release is that you can see which slips are released because they're a slightly different color. So if I click here, I've held a slip. I can pick a work code, CYRE, and hit the release here, and now I've released for all of that work code. Some folks prefer this method of releasing the slips. Okay, what I didn't spend a lot of time on today is actually how to add expenses in, but you can do that you can write up and write down expenses and incorporate them into the rows, in other words, bury them, or you can add them at the bottom of the invoice using these 3 powerful options here, and then you can release the expenses by double clicking right here on this screen. That's another quick tool to release. So I hope that's helped you with the SuperBills, giving you some idea how to use templates, how to distinguish between whether you want to release all the slips and pretty much detach the explanations from the detailed time that's being cleared, or whether you want to go line item by line item using released or clear slips, this code, and the bill excluded feature, which is used for those extra services that are outside the scope of the normal engagements. Memo rows are cosmetic. The don't clear and apply are used for progress bills and final bills. So that gives you a quick summary. One last minor item is the calculated row. If you are a preparer that possibly charges IRS insurance as a percentage of the services, 5% of the services, you're going to want to use the calculated row to calculate the amount of that fee. Okay, I hope that's helpful. If you have any other questions, please give our tech support department a call, and thank you very much for using ImagineTime.